those funny sound contrasts that you weren't expecting. Here's an example from Spain. You have, for example, the contrast between B and V. So for a Spanish student, this street here might sound exactly the same as this. You might find yourself unable to distinguish in their speech which they intend. Because in Spanish they are allophones of the same sound. So this game then, I've given you an empty street map on the website, so you can put your own street names on. But this particular one is suitable for Spanish students. And the idea is you give the location of one of these points by saying something like this. It's on the corner of Bilton Street and River Street. D. That's exactly where I meant. Good. It's on the corner of Grape Street and Wilton Street. 8. As much as anything, these minimal pairs are a question of becoming aware of areas of danger, just as much as being able to accurately make the difference. It's also being, I came across that E in my class and I know I've got a difficulty with that. And so if somebody looks at me with a blank face, I'll say it. No, rib, like that. You know, exaggerating it. Because it's not a question of always getting it right, it's a question of being able to negotiate to get it right eventually if you come into difficulty. It's a question of reaching an understanding, building a bridge, communicating. This is the famous Adrian Underhill chart, which is now an app as well, called the Pronunciation app. If your students have a smartphone, they can download this app and have that to hand if they want. Most classrooms have this in it. Has anybody not seen this before? This particular version of the chart? Has anybody not seen it?
No, I don't know. I don't recognise that one with the arrows.
No, that actually is... I've never seen Adrian explain what that is. I think it might just be a filler because there's an...
Oh, really? Use it. I know what it is, I can put it in the notes.
Can you tell us what it is now?
I think it's to do with the way that your mouth changes and the direction of the vowel, so from wide to narrow.
Okay. I don't know if you've ever seen Adrian Underhill presenting this. He does a great thing where he gets the students going, you know, like this. And the students say the sound, he doesn't say it. But still, you can have good fun with this. One proviso is that it tends to make you, or force you, to be more analytic than you want to be sometimes. For instance, these two sounds here have been coalescing in English since the late 60s or something. In Jimson, they mentioned this. This is ur, and this is or, like the word pour, or tor. In my particular accent, they're the same. I go on a tour bus. It's the same, but some people might say tour. Fact is, because there's two sounds, two symbols, the student might go, "Oh, teacher, can you explain the difference between these two?" And you're going, "Well, actually, it doesn't matter because if you use them interchangeably, your student still intelligible perfectly. But if you think of that game that I did at the first part of the lesson today, it had two of these symbols at the top. You might show them two symbols just to symbolise that this is pronunciation we're dealing with. Because if you just showed them I and double E, they might then not realise that also counts for EA. So you can use it minimally, and you can just maybe write those up on the board and or on a piece of paper in the one-to-one class, and just work on them and demonstrate how that they're related. Because, well, what is the relationship between that and that?
Just keep your lips shut forward.
It's this complete closure of the lips. If you're doing this one, I like to say, well, it's got to be watertight. So I say, imagine jumping in the canal. Do this before you jump, otherwise you're going to get that horrible dirty water going in. This kind of imagery, because the sound hit the air and it comes out of the nose, but it's the same position you're in for this. So you're dealing with a group of them, and then for all of the different nationalities, there's going to be one area where there's something of interest to be said. Or in your case, with a one-to-one class, if you're dealing with a group, you can explore what difficulties they have. Assess which part of that is tricky for them, and then hone in on it. So with ship and sheep, you're just dealing with one pair. I'm suggesting you can widen it into groupings of sounds. Have a lesson based on a group of them, which are grouped for some reason, and then hone in on the bit which is tricky. Moving on to the theme of sounds and spelling. And as I said, it's principally a question of vowel sounds. So here's a little game you can invent, you can make for yourself. Choose a given vowel sound, put it in the middle, and here again you might just choose to use one symbol without considering teaching all of the symbols. Just say, this is the sound that you have in these two words, okay? And then just put all of these, put a selection of consonant beginnings. These are not in phonetics, these are just normal spellings, and endings. And then ask your student to find words and write them down. Like this, for example, bird. And if the student goes through doing that a few times, they're going to notice something interesting about spelling. That first of all of the words they come up with will have an R in the spelling. And secondly, all of the different consonant letters in English can sound like that. So it comes as a bit of surprise to sometimes, you know. Student might say, but I was sure that's words. And it turns out, no, it's words, just like birds. So you can make these quite easily, just choose a given vowel sound and a selection of beginnings and endings and see what they come up with. Going back to this idea of grouping of sounds, I have a lesson where I do all of the vowels that usually have an R in the spelling. That's quite a useful grouping as well. What they call the R-coloured vowel sounds, which are all of those ones that are normally spelt with an R, which in British English or English, the R is not really pronounced. It's just a part of the vowel. So that's another way of grouping the R vowels. There's another one which depends on them sort of separating in their minds the pronunciation from the spelling, this game. What you have to do is, you say this word, aim, keeping the same pronunciation, add one of these sounds to the beginning. came. How do you spell came? C-A-M-E. And so the student can then see that there are two different ways of spelling that vowel sound. You can have it as a digraph like that, or with the A-M-E, the silent E at the end thing. So the game is to sort of raise awareness of this spelling pattern. And to get the students with two brains, the spelling brain and the pronunciation brain, sort of separate. Here's just a little game to do with word stress. And in this case, they are all verbs. And the idea is you can go through from start to finish, passing through only if the stress is on the first syllable. So you go in your answer, bother, begin, no, carry, agree. It's quite interesting because, well, here's the answer, by the way. You can actually, there's no rules to this. You have to learn these things one by one. But interestingly enough, certain endings like ER tend to be unstressed. Another example of that would be EN. So there are certain patterns must come back from the days of whether it comes from Norman or from Anglo-Saxon or whatever, in the morphology of the word, which you're not going to teach the students, but they might just pick up intuitively after a bit. As a matter of fact, 60% of verbs have the other pattern, with the stress on the second syllable. So the rule isn't very useful for verbs. 60% is not too useful. Whereas for nouns it's very useful, because for a noun it's on the first syllable in 90% of cases. That's a useful rule. I put a blank one of these on the website, both this big version and the smaller grid, in case you wanted to bother making your own, which means here's how you do it. Whatever feature you're looking at, word stress or whatever, you put the correct ones in there first, and then when you've done that, you fill in all of the empty ones with incorrect ones.
You can also get your students to do it themselves. I did that with an advanced student, with words that came up in the class.
In order for you to test you?
Yeah.
Right. In the area now of the overlap between grammar and pronunciation, this is something I've been using for ED endings. So you can see there's quite a lot of them in there. It's a kind of rhyme. You can read it out to the student, first of all, and then you can drill it. And here's a format of drill which I like using, especially if they have difficulty with this consonant cluster, walked or stopped. You get them to repeat from the end, like this. Repeat, please. Hill. The hill. Up the hill. Top the hill. Top the hill. Walked up the hill. I walked up the hill. This is called back chaining, when you start a repetition drill from the end. But the trick move is the top the hill, because the student isn't expecting it. So they notice, it makes them hear kind of objectively, if you see what I mean. It's objectivity shock.
I use that quite a lot. My students find it quite fun. I think
The back chaining?
Yeah. Yeah, I think students like it's almost a bit like relief sometimes. It seems like fun, but it's very effective.
Okay. And this thing about listening objectively, in Spain in particular, if you say, repeat after me, walked, walk it, walked, walk it, no, walked, yes, walking. They think that's what they're hearing, because the spelling in their mind's eye is stronger than their ear. So by breaking it up in that surprising way, top the hill, it's sort of, what, am I hearing right? Is that what you said? Top the hill? What? Ah, I see, walked up. Ah. So it's quite useful as a way of making their ear more objective. Reading aloud now. Reading aloud is an activity we all like. Keeps the student busy for a bit. And here's a sequence of activities which are focused reading aloud, rather than just broad reading aloud. This is ways of focusing on particular features. This one, for example, function versus content words. We walk for miles. We walk 4 miles. The idea is to show that it makes a difference. So you can play a game with this, like the game we had before with the map leading to Cairo or Istanbul. If they say this one, go one way, that one, they go the other.
Well, you could show them the one even off the schedule for.
It's fun.
More candles.
I had a student, she went to buy a bus ticket and she said, I want to return to the city centre, and the bus driver gave her 2.
2.
Even though there was only one of them.
It does happen. Okay. And then you can tell on the more general point. These unstressed prepositions. Don't stress prepositions, otherwise the listener is going to look for a reason. And if you haven't got one, you're misrepresenting yourself, like your student. Then you've got things, or aspects of punctuation. In this case, the full stop. Is the full stop here or here? They're leaving. Soon it'll be quieter. Before or after? Changes the meaning, but which did you hear?
Oh, I see, yeah.
Before. Is what did I say before? They're leaving. Soon it'll be quieter. Yeah. Before. They're leaving. Soon it'll be quieter. They're leaving. Soon it'll be quieter. They're leaving soon. It'll be quieter. You know these things where you're asking the student to distinguish which one you say? It's good, I think, to say a lot of them the same, because then it makes them really think, but surely they're going to say the other ones. You can do the similar thing with commas and quotation marks. And then there's reciting a rhyme, bringing out the rhythm of it. This particular one I've devised to go with the tune of favourite theme. And you've got the pattern here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. It's actually quite natural. The stressed syllables would naturally be stressed. So it's not artificial, despite the fact it's very regular. So let's try this then. Repeat after me.
Can we dance?
Picnics and parties and Sunday siestas, birthdays and Christmas and summer semesters, hot dogs and burgers and ketchup and cheese. These are a few of my favourite things. Oh, you're in good voice. These things are fantastic in my view for pronunciation practice. Because the student is relieved of the responsibility of formulating what they're going to say. They can just focus on the production and putting all of those, squeezing all of those syllables in and joining it all up and getting that rhythm, which, as I say, is natural despite the fact it's regular in this particular example.